The Carolina Hurricane season is over. They are eliminated in the Eastern Conference Final by the Florida Panthers. Jared Ellis of Locked On Hurricanes tells us what went wrong and what we can expect for this offseason from the Canes. Gil Martin here. The Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup continues as we welcome Jared Ellis of Locked On Carolina Hurricanes to discuss the team's conference final loss to the Florida Panthers and to take a look ahead at what their offseason will look like. And Jared, what was the biggest reason that the Hurricanes were swept by the Florida Panthers?
So I feel like there's a couple things that go into that. I feel, first and foremost, injuries. Injuries piling up. And, that goes with any team in the playoffs, whether it's, the Hurricanes, whether it's the Islanders, whether it's, a different sport. Injuries always pile up in the playoffs, and it takes a toll on teams, regardless of the sport. And I do think, in this conference final, definitely not having Andrei Svechnikov hurt, and Max Pacioretty as well. Teuvo Teravainen definitely wasn't at 100%, and I feel that was something that was it started to add up and or pile up, excuse me, and I feel that was a big thing there. And one thing we talked about on Locked On Hurricanes was I feel that at times they didn't adapt to the game as good as they should have, and they kept while yes you want to stick to your game, I don't feel they made as many adjustments as they should have to try to counter what the Florida Panthers are doing, because the Florida Panthers had really scouted the Hurricanes really, really well, and they were able to do a lot. And I think that was something else, is maybe they could have made a few different adjustments. Now, obviously, the history books are going to look at this as a sweep, and it definitely was, but these were also games that were much closer, and these were games that could have gone either way. I want to say they're all one score games, if I remember correctly. So, they get a lucky bounce, this series is still going on. And I feel that was another thing with the Hurricanes. They just had no luck whatsoever. They're constantly hitting the post, and just the puck luck had dried up. And, the power play, it just wasn't there. And it was just kind of all these things mounting and piling up that really did it in for them. But, again, this series could have gone another way, had they got this one bounce here, this one bounce there.
What player or players most underperformed for Carolina in this series?
So there's a few that I think, but first and foremost is Sebastian Aho. I think they really could have used him a lot more. He did step it up in Game 4. He was definitely had some good moments there, and same with Game 3. He was very much trying to do all he could, but again, the Panthers scouted the Hurricanes really well, and they knew, like, all right, we got to shut Sebastian Aho down, and he wasn't really able to be a part of much of anything. But yeah, he's definitely one I wish he would have kicked it into another game. He was doing all he could, and that's a big thing with all these players. They're doing all they could, and so on that side, I know I'm not trying to give them too much crap on it. But again, Sebastian Aho is a guy like we really could have used him to step up his game a bit more. And gosh, we could be here all day, talking about guys I wish stepped up a bit more. Brady Shea and Brett Pesce, they're usually 9 times out of 10, arguably the Hurricanes' best defensive pairing, on some nights. And that wasn't the case for actually quite a bit of the playoffs, to be honest. They just, really looked like they were struggling. But yeah, Sebastian Aho, he's the biggest one.
So, were there any bright spots from this series that the team could carry forward into the summer and maybe even into next season?
Oh, 110%, yes. The goaltending was phenomenal. Antti Ranta and Frederick Anderson, both played out of their minds. Look at Freddie in that 4 overtime game. Like, he played out of his mind, and the goaltending was great from Anderson and Ranta, not just in this series, but throughout the playoffs, with maybe the one negative being that Game 3 against New Jersey. But goaltending was really great throughout the playoffs. penalty kill again was really, really great as a whole in the playoffs. Yes, Florida was finally able to crack it and get some power play goals against the Hurricanes, which wasn't the case for your Islanders. I think the Islanders got one. I don't even remember if the Devils got any. It may have just been one or two for them. So penalty kill was another thing that was really, really good. And Jordan Martinook in that second round series against the Devils, and yeah, him in the conference final as well. He's another guy who's just doing all he could. But defensively, and they were great this postseason and in this series. And the goaltending again was great, but it was just kind of the offense drying up and them not getting that puck luck.
So does this loss coming in the conference final render the season a failure in your mind?
No, I won't say it was a failure. Definitely a deflating and disappointing end. Because it kind of felt like the stars were aligning. Boston was out. A lot of the heavy favorites were out, and it felt like it was Hurricanes had a clear path. So, I do feel that there's that disappointing aspect, and then they're not a team at this point that they're just happy to be here. There's expectations on this team. They're a consistent winner and consistent playoff team. So they're going to have expectations on them. And I think those heightened expectations, especially with Boston being out, definitely brought us back down a bit more and made it sting a bit more than it did in 2019 when they lost to Boston in the conference final. And then it's not a stat I put too much into, but the fact that their past three conference final appearances have all been sweeps. Pittsburgh in 09, Boston in 2019, and now Florida. That's definitely kind of disappointing, but yeah, I definitely think this season is a success. We talked at the start of the playoffs. I said they got to get to the conference final, get over that second round hump. And I think at that point, then, okay, we're really looking at this as a successful season. They got to where the expectations were. At the start of the playoffs, everyone's penciling in Boston to win the Stanley Cup. Of course, how could you not? But everyone's thinking Carolina is getting to the conference final. Then they'll lose to Boston. Boston goes on and win the cup. So they met the expectations that folks had for them. When the playoffs started of getting to the conference final. If I remember correctly, at the start of the season, that's what my expectation was. I wanted them to get over that second round hump, and they did that. They got to the conference final. Disappointing, deflating way for it to end, but at the end of the day, I think it's a successful season. They met the expectations for the most part, and now it's just looking on the next year.
So coming off this series loss, what kind of changes do you expect for this team over the summer?
I definitely think there's going to be a lot of changes because they have a lot of UFAs with both goalies. Our captain, Shane Gosper. There's so many. So there's going to be guys that are finding new homes, and guys that may, in Jordan Saul's case, could retire. I don't know. He's obviously up there in age, but there's definitely going to be changes to be made for sure. I think as far as re-signing guys, letting guys walk, whatever, but also I do feel that this is yet another example of they need a goal scorer. They need a guy whose mentality is shoot first, not pass first, because that's a lot of the guys they have, and which isn't a bad thing, but we saw it a lot, throughout the playoffs. They're passing a bit too much, and they're not taking those clear shots that they have. So I do feel that is one thing they really, really got to do. Obviously, that was supposed to be Max Pacioretty. Things didn't work out well. We'll see what happens with him. He's, of course, another UFA on the Hurricanes list. So, if they're willing to take that risk, with him having two Achilles tears in less than a year, I want to say right around the 6-month mark, to be honest. But if they're willing to take that risk, do you bring him back? We could be here for hours talking about that. But yeah, goal scorer is definitely going to be big.
All right. Well, Jared, thank you so much. That does it for our Carolina Hurricanes review here on the Locked On Road to the Stanley Cup. Be sure to subscribe to or follow Locked On Carolina Hurricanes for free on YouTube. Wherever you get your podcasts, and now available on SiriusXM on the SXM app. The Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.